Hello and welcome to the Wise Why this morning. Now, of course, as per usual, what do I always forget to do? Check how to pronounce someone's surname. So I'm going to make a stab at this because it's the one question I forgot to ask. I'm joined with Susanna Reay. Is that right?
Correct.
Awesome. And I met Susanna by accident. We had a 5-minute conversation and instantly she recognized that I was an introvert. And it was really interesting because not many people would see that. So, as usual, the Wise Why is not about me. It is about my guest. Susanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you very much for coming along. Like I say, coming along, for me to come along. We need to relax, don't we? Everyone needs to take a deep breath. And that's actually about the core of my Introvert Way philosophies, is to honor the pause and to give ourselves the moment to think. So a slightly unusual way probably to enter a podcast, a recording.
We literally just did that before. So, one of the things that we do before we go live is we take that pause. So, I think that's a lovely way to come in because nobody sees that. So,
Yeah.
to actually see it live on air and go, we all get nervous, we all get flustered, we all suddenly feel out of our comfort zone. And taking that pause is really important. So, thank you for sharing that.
There we go. It's how we come to do what we do. I think is best when we connect with who we are. And this is why for me, ever since, gosh, I was probably 14 when I first got interested in personalities and how that affects us. And the reason why I got interested is I'm naturally curious anyway, but at school, what I was finding, I'm someone who's full in. If I commit to something, I do it. My energy is full in there. I'm part of theatre societies, drama. I was doing orchestra. I'd be playing tennis. I'd be doing all the things. I'd get home from school at 4 o'clock. I was asleep. I wasn't ill, but that was when I discovered I was introverted because it's how I need to manage my energies. And I know many people I talk to now in the introvert space, they say it's because they've read certain books in the last 10 years. There's been a whole rise in the awareness. And I know I'm quite unusual that from an early age, I looked at, well, what was happening inside of me? Because I was like, I'm not shy. And people were, in fact, even telling me, like, oh, Susanna, you need to be going on anti-confidence courses. Because this was back in the 80s when it was like, power shoulders and let's go and be confident and take us out there. And I was like, no, we need to be aligned to us. But it took a long time in terms of my business for this to become the forefront. Because I think, and in conversation with you, Kirsty, you've mentioned as well that in the industry, you felt that you couldn't necessarily be who you naturally were. And I got to a point, and it was about 10 years ago now, where I was like, no, I've just got to be me. It's too exhausting trying to be anything else. And also working in the online space, that I've been working online for 20 years and very much the forefront of the digital nomad space. But I was hearing so many people propelling extrovert methods and methodologies that like book yourself solid by having back-to-back phone calls. And I was like, yeah, I can see it in your face. We're just like 3 phone calls maximum in one day. And actually, I prefer this where we're face to face and I can see you. So the advent of the technology to do video has been such a boon to me because I'm very visual as well. I like to take the cues. I like to see faces. I still to this day ask me to pick up, my phone, my mobile phone. They're more like this. I'm doing the old fashioned phone symbol here.
I like it. It's cool.
And I'm like, no, even if I've got to ring like the garage to put my car in, I will put off that phone call for a long, long time booking the calls to do things like the dentist. I'm like, why can't they have an online booking system? Everyone else does. I can do that at midnight then. I don't have to do it during working hours. And
that's interesting, because so one of the things this is where we slightly differ. I get really frustrated, and I mean it, by online booking systems. I want to speak to a human, and to the point that the school run time for me is really important, because I phone lots of people in the school run. I am hands free, but I am catching up with the people that I don't get to sit down and probably because I coach video coaching. It's probably why I'm slightly different. I quite like my time off camera, actually, because when I am on camera, it's really super intense, because I'm watching for every minuscule movement. I'm I'm listening to every single thing that you say and how you say it. So I guess it's intense. So that's why. In fact,
no pressure. You didn't put any pressure on me. Just
well,
did you hear that, listeners?
Just listen, but just think about this for a second. You're not aware of this, because normally I tell my guests this, but you're not aware of this. I am only looking at you. This is really interesting. I'm only looking at you in my peripheral vision, because I am actually looking directly at my camera here and you're on my screen here. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm using active listening.
Yeah.
So,
and active listening is something introverts completely rock at, I would have to say. So I love that you're not looking directly, as you say, for this purpose, and it is really important for that purpose. So that's great.
Yeah, it's a skill that I got, and I keep talking about this company, but hey, here we go again. I got it on an Oxlep training course, and I was about to start the Wise Why, and it was suddenly like, that's where I want to do it. I want the guests to shine, and if the guests are going to shine, and we will come back to you, but if the guests are going to shine, I need to listen, and I need to really listen. And that means I've got to turn off, because I'm an on-camera coach, I've actually got to turn off my study head and listen. So that's why I do it this way.
Yeah.
So as I was listening, 20 years coaching online, that is huge. If you think back to, now my brain's just gone, what year are we in? 2022. The birth of the internet and the way we embrace the internet was around the year 2000. I was out working for Intel in 2002, and I was launching Intel Centrino machines actually around 2003, 2004. You coaching online 20 years ago, I want to explore that, because that is huge.
Yeah, so when I say I've been working online in terms of coaching, I've always worked in the online space. Obviously, 20 years ago, we were dealing in Skype mainly, and there was still a lot of lagging in that space. I mean, like now it's amazing, like the difference, but it was still possible. And it was back then as well. That is when I started my journey my adult journey, I would say, of moving around the world, because I've never been that sort of location dependent in my work, and therefore tools like Skype and being able to talk and with people across continents basically has been really good. And at that point in my business as well, it was a lot about helping people set up their websites for the first time. So it was always around, what does your business do? What's the strategy behind? Like, what do you want to start with? So I've got a design background, and I went to art school. I also went to business school, and these things were always coming together for me. And quite often the lead, particularly if you think back to 2002, most business owners did not actually have a website unless you were a big corporate. The small business owner was just beginning to think about, oh, I need this. And in 2005, I moved to France, from the UK to France. And then it started even looking at, well, how can we be bilingual on websites? Like, we want the French and the English. And then a few years after that, I moved to Switzerland. And then suddenly there's 4 languages that people are saying, how can we bring this in? And it was in that time when there was a huge expansion in what we now know today in terms of websites of the what you see is what you get, the WYSIWYG, they were called handily at the time, the WYSIWYG editors. What you see is what you get. And there started to become these wonderful things like plugins where they would automatically translate and make things easier. But all the time I was working with business startups who were understanding that they needed to show their services, they needed branding, they needed imagery, but it had to link in with their strategy. And what I was seeing quite early on is you'd have business owners and they were sort of piecemealing out saying, hey, graphic designer, can you just make me a logo? And then that was like the extent of the brand. And your branding goes so much deeper than that. And I'm loving the nodding and the big eyes. I'm like,
oh my God. And only because I am going through that with a client right now, and it's right down to your font. It's right down to the font you choose. It's right down to, there's so much in it. And then you shoot a video and it's not even linked to the brand. It's not even got your core message yet. And let's not go off on that tangent, because that's one of my pet subjects is brand is not just about logo or colours.
No, it is so much more. And one of the things as well that we've seen an upsurge in the last, I'd say 10 years probably, is the rise of the personal brand, which is whether people are working for themselves, as I do, or if you're in a company, you still have a personal brand. And what I mean by this is your personal brand is basically what people say about you when you're not in the room. And how you show up everywhere is very much, it all pulls into it. So whether it's on video, whether it's on your social feeds, on your website, even in your coaching sessions and when you're serving clients. And this was one of the things that drew me to working with introverts more, because I was finding many people who are more introverted in nature. And as I mentioned, or I think I referred to at the start, that being introvert is how we harness our energies. It's not about being shy, but what we also always want to do is we want to speak to what's important to us. We're not bothered about sharing the food we just had. We're not bothered about talking about the weather. When we have a discussion, we want to dive in deep and prefer it to be meaningful. Now, unfortunately, on social media and showing up, there's a lot of very unmeaningful stuff going on, but it does entertain. I'll give them that. And entertainment is one of those, and I'm sure you share this, Kirsty. There's 3 key things you're meant to do when you show up. One being entertain, and I'll throw across to Kirsty for the other 2.
So I don't know them because I don't. That's not the way that I coach, not the way I was trained. So we different ways of doing it. So it's interesting because I don't look at, and because I only coach social media for business, and I'm not interested. If you're going to entertain, go find someone else. I am interested in you being informative. I am interested in you being educational, adding value. If you don't add value behind every single thing you post online, you're not a client for me, because I am only interested in you showing the value add in everything I do. So you have to have that value add. You have to have that you have to have that knowledge, you have to share it, and you have to give something away. And I've probably just totally ignored it because of the word entertainment, because I was that actor and an entertainer. Anything that has that word entertainment in it, I go, yeah, to me, that's going to be kicking my legs. Not today because I'm 51, but that's me doing tap springs and doing jazz hands and actually doing a full show. So probably, or alternative, being intimate and being Dr. Joanna Robertson or some other character on TV. So entertainment to me absolutely means something completely different. So I've probably ignored that when I've heard that going along the lines.
Yeah, but it's interesting because you are doing the other 2, which is to educate and enlighten, because it's about motivation, inspiration is giving value as much as education in the how-tos. And the introverts of the world tend to be more interested in that value add space. So for me, that's really interesting that, yes, you're introverting, you're saying that's where I want to focus on, because that's the value add piece.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean as business owners, you can't also be entertaining. And there's some people who I see on Instagram and they are superb business coaches, but their Instagram feed is also a tad of entertainment because they've got a natural humor about them. And that's fine because they're not putting it on. And I think this is the whole point about being aligned to yourself. I can get a bit goofy at times as well, but I'll only do it when it feels like, oh, I just completely want to do this. And like, this is me. It might not show every day, but what it does show is when we start being a bit more relaxed, you're being you. You're no longer putting on this sort of mask, basically, for trying to be who you're not. And this is where I was like listening to all this sort of how you should be. There was lots of you should be doing this. And I was
I hate the word should. I genuinely, and I don't like to use the word hate, but I hate the word should because it puts so much pressure. It's a bit like the word, what's the other one that, it was really difficult. That's not the one I use. I changed something to challenge because challenge is nicer than hard. There you go. I don't, and as I spoke to you before we came on air, it's not mistakes, it's an evolution.
Yes.
But should goes into that bracket of, ow, how much pressure are you putting on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is why when people say, oh, I'm so exhausted, like, do I have to be on like everywhere? And no, you don't. One is enough. And I say to my clients, yes, you might find me everywhere, but remember what I shared? That was 20 years. I've grown with these platforms. Twitter will tell me, oh, I think in Twitter, I was a bit later to the party. I've only been there 15 years, but I've been on LinkedIn since those very early days as well. On Facebook, I remember when I got like a message, I was on a Skype with someone in the UK. This was when I was living in Switzerland, and going, oh, there's this new thing called Facebook. It's when it sort of come across the ocean from the US to Europe. And I was like, oh, that looks interesting. But way before groups, way before business pages, way before advertising. And when you grow up with these things, it's easier to be across multiple platforms. But if you're starting out now, if you're wanting to grow a following now, focus on one thing, because I find the reality of it is no one can absolutely, really, it's a lie about multitasking. We're better just focusing on one thing for, say, 90 days, grow it, develop it. You can absolutely then start playing around, experimenting. And I'm a big fan of experimenting with what you're doing. Don't think I've got to do it this way. If it's not working for you, try something else.
I think that's a really important point. So a lot of people, they post. And I want to move on to how you've evolved recently with your new you've shifted. But on that, the one thing people don't do is they don't check their data. And if you don't check your data, you don't know if anything's working or not. And that's why my brand changed. That's why you now have purple instead of blue. It's why my website and my company name, because it goes back to that personal brand by accident. And I do call it an accident. By launching this a year ago, I ended up building a personal brand. And I didn't mean to, but I did. And then I had to embrace, because this Wise Why drove so much that it drove my personal brand. Now, interesting enough, that introvert, back to the actor, I was talking about this yesterday. The one thing I really struggled with was my own name. Now, when I was an actor, I didn't work as Kirsty Vanderbilk. I worked as Kirsty Elkin. Not many people know that because I'm now remarried. But that using my name and moving from it being an acting name to, oh, that was really hard. That was my biggest moment of having to actually really overcome myself. So it's just interesting that data, and I do think it's really important, check your data.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the joys is it's so readily available these days. There's like no excuse not to. On any of the social platforms, the data is built into those platforms. There's no additional cost. You don't have to do anything. Google Analytics has been around for goodness knows how many years. That's always been there as well. And that is actually a great segue as to why, as you mentioned, I've had a slight transition this year, because this started and I've been focusing on coaching introvert entrepreneurs in terms of how to scale their business and really sort of grow group programs so they can start to really harness their energies in exactly the right space. And this is why I'm a fan of being able to move beyond the one-to-one. And what happened, and it was actually on a grey February morning, and I had my mastermind clients coming together, and I had yet another email that sort of popped in from one of the clients going, I haven't really had a chance to do anything, but I'm going to come along and listen in because I know you always motivate me, inspire me. I feel better. And then something just clicked inside me at this point. I thought, right, I need to mix up this session. So I had been running them in the very traditional sort of coaching mastermind sense where we're talking through the issues, people are making notes, and then they'll go away. And I was like, right, this is going to be an action session.
Awesome.
And I didn't warn them, but all I said is basically I got them on the call and I was like, right, this is going to change. Have you got a plain piece of paper in front of you and a pen? And they're all like nervously like nodding because yes, my introvert peeps, they always have a pen and paper in front of them because they love making notes, you see? Hey, it's like I know I'm one. So I've always got that in front of me. And they're like, oh my God, what is Susanna going to make us do? And here's the thing. I've been working with frameworks, visual frameworks, again, in my business right since the early doors. And even back, if I take my brain back to those school days, I was drawing frameworks in the margins of my notebooks. I was drawing diagrams to help me memorize what I had to come up with exams. And now, 40 years on, I'm 50 now, I still know some of those frameworks because I drew them out and I understood where I was going because I got clarity, I got connection, and it really helped with recall. And so on that February morning, I was like, okay, I need to like bring the frameworks back into the front rather than being one of 10 pre-recorded lessons. That's part of the bigger picture. I was like, come on, guys, you need to do this. And so I took them through one of them. I have over 20 now. And I took them through one of them on that session. And none of them they sort of like attempted it on their own, but they hadn't really dug into it. By the end of that session, I actually then put on the recording to share with those who hadn't turned up at that session. Again, I was like, come on, guys, you're paying for this. You should be here. And I said, I just want to share with the others. How are you feeling now? And they were like, oh my God, I've got so much clarity. I'm motivated. I know exactly what I'm going to sell. I know who I'm going to talk to in my marketing. And it was, that grey day had turned colourful within an hour for those people. And that was the sort of flashpoint that it said to me, in your business, Susanna, you need to bring the frameworks to the fore. And since then, I've trademarked the name Sparkle Frameworks because I also differentiate between a static framework, which is just more akin to an infographic where something is flat on the page. And you'll love this bit, Kirsty, is they start getting interactive. You can share them on videos. in presentations, and you build the tension so people can also understand and relate to where they are within that framework, which then helps the sales for the business.
Yeah.
So it was all from that grey morning. I
Love
was
it.
like, this is what I need to do. And it naturally drew together my creative, the artist in me, the art school student, the business school student. And I was like, boom.
Love it. And I love it for a lot of reasons, because that's why I'm visual. Obviously, as a dyslexic, I'm going to be visual. So I'm about to hit my first visual. If everything goes well next week, I'm not just going to hit it, I'm going to surpass it, which is amazing. But I love the visual whole way that we can explore. And, it's that knowing that if you see things in pictures and you have you have that shape, you know what you're working to. And for me, that really works. So I'm really pleased that you've shared that. Thank you. Thank you very much. So as we've been, it's been brilliant. I want to know who's inspired you. I want to know, and also I want to know about aha moments, because aha moments resonate with every single person. We've just talked about one in February, but there must have been some other aha moments along the way, and there must be people who have inspired you.
So on the topic of inspiration, that's a really interesting one for me, because I've never been someone who celebrity watches or follows or takes people in terms of the famous side. And if you ask me if I watch a film, who was the actor? Sorry, I don't remember their names, like, unless they're like uber famous. But there have undoubtedly been. So for me, it's more, rather than specific people, there's moments. And I think that's, as you say, talking about the aha moments. And along the way, part of my deeper why as to why I was always working online as well is because I do have 2 children. I wanted to be around for them. I also wanted to show them what the new world was looking like. That the traditional world of going to work with a company, being that 9-to-5 slave and not being yourself, wasn't needed. That you can, and particularly as a woman, you can have a business and a life. And I do work with both men and women. And even the men now, I love it, love it, love it. They're saying, hey, I want some lifestyle too. I don't want to be working till midnight every night and not seeing my family. And so that was one of my early aha moments of how I could use the technology to not only transition in with my lifestyle and at the time with young children, but also because I was moving and I've always been globally transient. I'm working with people around the world. And so it was this aha moment of the technology is there. Why not use it? And the ability to be on video as well. You get deeper, faster connections. And it did take me quite a long time to get on video in terms of outwardly in marketing. Yes, I was on Skype right early days, with my clients who I was talking to, but it did take a piece. And I went, no, the way I'm going to do this, I'm just going to, and again, this is why I mentioned when I do something, I commit to it. So how did I get comfortable on camera? I said, every Wednesday at 9:30, I'm going to go live for 10 minutes for a year. And that's what I did I think it was about 3 years ago now, 4 years ago. So that was a real aha moment of how you can really connect faster by using video. And it's a bit about just getting over yourself. And one of the analogies I always use with clients, and they go, oh, Susanna, I can't. And so even though I don't teach video, I'll send them towards you, Kirsty. I'm always going, hey, you need to do this. Because I'm saying, well, if you owned a shop, you wouldn't have a paper bag on your head as you were behind the counter. You would still be you. You'd be welcoming. You'd be talking about your products, your goods in the store. And it's no different with services. And this is where the frameworks come in, because many people, not just introverts, struggle with the, again, old-fashioned, pushy, icky sales of going,
Oh,
hey, I'm amazing, come work with me, I'm the best person since sliced bread. And we're like, don't want to do that. But if we say, hey, I've got this framework, it's just to the side of me, and I take you through these processes, you're showing your credibility, you're showing your authority, and it's easy to talk about because that becomes your product. And it's so much easier talking about products than it is about the value that you've got within. Whereas if we bring it into a framework, that comes together. So there's elements of all these things, and I would be listening to people like Simon Sinek and the bigger why, and going, why am I doing this, and connecting and delving down. And at the end of the day, my biggest mission is I want to close that gender pay gap. I don't want there to be actually such a thing as gender. I mean, for me, everyone I meet is equal. I don't see man, woman, I see person. I'm interested in you and you as a person. And what can we come out of that?
You touched on a lot of really interesting things there. It's interesting about the salespeople and the shouting, because one of the things that I firmly believe is you should never, ever ask somebody why. And yet I'm sitting here asking you why. Although I don't think I've actually used the word why necessarily. It's like I've asked you who inspired you. I haven't asked you why you set up your business. And the reason this is actually called the Why is Why, and I've said this before, is because I got sick and tired of all the people on social media shouting down the camera and oh my goodness, going, do you know your why? And it was like, whoa, we need to know our why, absolutely, but we don't need to shout it, and we do not need to pitch on social media. We have to, as I said earlier, we have to show our value, and with social selling and going on camera is, as you said, very much like how you would be in a shop. So I talk about going on camera being like you would talk to somebody in a coffee shop. It is intimate. It is not about shouting down the lens. And it actually, if you remember right back before we went live, I asked you to sit back from the camera because it was too much on the camera lens, because the camera likes space. So it's interesting because I really firmly believe everyone should embrace video. Oh, I use the word should. I should rephrase that. Everybody must actually embrace video, whether you're feeling confident or not confident, because most video is actually viewed on your mobile phone, and social media and your video is now your, oh, I'm going to say it out loud, your shop front window. That's it. That is why everyone should do it. So those are my opinions. I love that you've gone visual, but we have been talking for nearly 33 minutes. So this is where, and I've loved this conversation, this is where I get to go into the hot seat. Now, I always dread this moment, especially when I've got someone like you on, because I just go, oh no, you're going to expose me. So, and that's the introvert coming in. So feel free, ask me a question. I will do my best to answer it directly and not deflect it.
It's like, ha, 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 ha. Sorry, I'm throwing back the evil.
Oh, before we go there, actually, we've had some comments. I meant to say, so I don't know who has joined us because unfortunately I can't see their name, but a lovely person on LinkedIn has said morning to us, and they've also said this resonates so much with them. So thank you for sharing. And that must have been around us talking about just being human, and it was about 9:37. So we've had a couple of people watching and commenting. I don't get the comments from YouTube, unfortunately, which is a real shame, but it's really cool. So anyway, I always like to bring in the people because they've given us their time this morning, and I really appreciate that. So back to you throwing a question at me.
So I would say, what's your biggest challenge in your business at the moment? What's that hurdle that's ahead of you that you're going, I don't want to do? Because we all have them.
So I think I'm about to escalate, and it really is that simple. I'm 1 or 2 contracts away from having to escalate. That means I am going to have to either take on an apprentice, take on a VA, find somebody in the Mums Network that wants some admin. And it's exciting. At the same time, it is petrifying.
Because it's losing control, right?
Well, it's not about losing. It's funny enough, it's not about losing control. It's about letting someone down. Right. So I bring somebody in and then I don't have, say the work dries up, then I have to let them go, and I will be personally invested in that person, and I will care for that person because that's the person I am. I don't see a person as a commodity. I see them
Yeah.
as a person. And so it's the letting someone down, and actually I'm really excited about passing some of the business over because again, back to Oxford, one of the things they teach you is how to escalate, or don't teach, they explore and they empower you to understand it. But it's that, it really is the fact that I am not far from escalating the business. Now, I've only been in running my own business for 2 years, so that's quite quick. And if I look at my balance book right now, it doesn't show you the numbers to escalate, but I'm looking at my forecast and I can see what's coming in, and I can see I might have to escalate and I might have to bring someone in. And that might mean that I then have to let them go because I don't just look here, I'm looking long term.
Yeah.
And the idea of disappointing somebody worries me. So there you go.
And it's really interesting that it's that piece, because as I've mentioned, the piece where I love working with businesses is when you're moving from this one-to-one and wanting to move one-to-many and scale, which, yes, sometimes that means bringing in people. And I love the fact that you've got that awareness that it might not be forever for that person, but nothing is certain. And probably the person who you bring on board will know that as well, because there's always trial times as well. And I know I've brought people on in my business, and for whatever reason, we've then had to step apart because it's not always down to the fact of the work in the business, but it's also about the personalities and the alignment. And then they might be going, well, my business is now escalating. And therefore they're like, I need to spend more time over there. So thank you for sharing that. That is a challenge, because I think the more we share about our challenges, the more it becomes normal. And I think that is one of my biggest wishes, is the more we can share generally, the better we'll all be. And I'm very much about collaboration over competition. And if we understand that other people are struggling, it will help that big sort of grey elephant in the room, which is mental health in and across the world at the moment, and how we can then bring that forward. Because if we share that, yeah, I'm struggling and I have similar challenges, and some days I'll wake up and go, why am I doing this? It just feels like the weight of the world is on you. And so I just wanted to bring in that piece of reality as well, because yes, it's been a journey to here, but the journey keeps continuing.
Exactly. We've had one more comment from the lovely Lindsay, I can't even speak this morning, Lindsay McLaughlin, who's just said, thank you. Two inspirational ladies in one place. Love Susanna's wisdom and knowledge. Great conversation. On that lovely note, we shall finish. If you want to watch it again, you can catch up on YouTube. Hey, I'm doing that call to action just because you're on I never do this. But yes, you can catch it on YouTube or watch it on Spotify. And of course, it's always on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I have too. Thank you.